At 15, my mom told me she should have left me, and my dad threw me out into a freezing storm after I failed a test. Years later, the same people tried to claim credit for the life they destroyed, but I wouldn't let it happen. I'm 30 now, and I run a small sales operations company. People assume I had some kind of strong upbringing because I talk well and handle myself, but most of what I learned came from surviving my parents, not from being raised by them. I'm not writing this for pity. I just want to finally lay out how things actually were, because the image people had of my family was nothing like the reality. I grew up in a house everyone in our neighborhood admired. Arthur, my dad, was a dentist who carried himself like he invented teeth. He corrected people mid-sentence, lectured neighbors about posture, and acted like any job outside medicine was a waste of oxygen. Elizabeth, my mom, was a middle school teacher parents worshipped. They called her Mrs. Morgan, like she was royalty. She remembered everyone's kids' names, acted sweet at school events, and pretended she had some natural gift for raising star students. Then there was Hazel, my older sister, by 1 year, the golden child. Straight A's, science competitions, violin recitals, the whole package. People said she'd be a doctor before she even hit high school. And then there was me, Xavier, the one nobody bragged about. Daily life inside that house was nothing like what the neighbors imagined. We had scheduled bathroom times color-coded and taped to the hallway wall. Study hours were monitored. If you finished early, you reviewed lesson plans. If you were tired, you were undisciplined. No hobbies unless they made you look impressive enough for relatives. Hazel got violin because it sounded fancy. I got nothing because nothing suits you. We didn't celebrate holidays unless photos were involved. Christmas decorations stayed in a box until the day Elizabeth needed something to post or send to relatives. The moment pictures were taken, everything went back into storage. Arthur spent most of his time bragging. At his clinic, he'd tell patients Hazel mastered algebra at 9, or Elizabeth and I have very high standards for our children. When people asked about me, he changed the subject. Elizabeth had the same habit. One afternoon, Arthur dragged me to his clinic's open house. I was 12. He handed me a white coat that smelled like chemicals and said, "Stand next to me. Look interested." He introduced me to his staff like I was some future dentist. Someone asked me what a curing light was. I shrugged. Arthur grabbed my shoulder hard enough to hurt and leaned down, whispering, "Embarrass me again, and you'll regret it." He made me repeat the term and definition 3 times in front of them. When patients came, he said, "My son will take over the practice one day." Like saying it enough would make it true. I just stood there wishing I could disappear. Hazel got her own share of pressure too. People think the golden child has it easy, but she didn't. One night when she was in 8th grade, she brought home an A on a science test. I wasn't supposed to see anything, but I was sneaking downstairs for water and froze on the steps when I heard yelling. Elizabeth stood in the hallway waving Hazel's paper like it was a crime report. Hazel kept saying, "It's still an A," but Elizabeth slapped her so hard she stumbled backward into the wall. I covered my mouth so they wouldn't hear me breathing. Arthur didn't console Hazel. He just muttered, "Your relatives will notice the difference." That was their fear, not Hazel's well-being, but the idea that someone might think the Morgans weren't perfect. Hazel cried quietly, while Elizabeth tore the test into pieces. "You made us look careless," she said. Arthur nodded, arms crossed, like Hazel had personally attacked the family name. I backed up the stairs slowly and pretended I hadn't heard anything. If they treated Hazel like that for an A-, I knew exactly what they thought of me. Their love wasn't love, it was performance, and we were props. By the time I hit middle school, Elizabeth decided my teachers didn't push me properly, so she took over my studying. She called it her teacher methods, but it was nothing like an actual classroom. She printed worksheets way above my level and sat across from me like she was judging a test show. "Focus, Xavier," she'd say, tapping her nails on the table. Hazel would have finished this already. If I hesitated, she leaned closer. "Answer. Why are you thinking so slow?" When I got something wrong, she circled it 3 times in red, slid the paper back to me and said, "Read it out loud slowly so you can hear how careless you sound." She paced behind my chair most days. I could feel her waiting for any mistake she could pounce on. If I asked for a break, she didn't even look at me. "Breaks are for students who show effort," she said. "You haven't earned that." Arthur added his own routine. After dinner, when Hazel went upstairs, he did what he called inspections. He would take my notebooks, flip through pages with the same expression he used looking at dental charts, and point out anything he considered sloppy. "This margin is uneven," he said one night. "Start over. It's just a homework page," I said quietly. "It reflects your mind," he replied. "Right now, it reflects a mess." During these inspections, he barely spoke. He made notes on a small pad, tapping the pencil each time he found something wrong. That tapping became something I dreaded. The punishment started getting physical. At first, Elizabeth flicked the back of my head when I zoned out. Then it turned into slaps, quick, sharp, emotionless. If I froze on a question, she didn't wait. "Refocus," she said, hitting my cheek lightly but firmly. "Stop wasting my time." Arthur handled what he called discipline reviews. They happened usually on Sundays. He shut the blinds, told me to stand still, and used his belt without raising his voice. "This is for your improvement," he said every time. "Remember that." I learned early that crying only made him say, "You're too sensitive. Toughen up." One day in 8th grade, I brought home a B on a math quiz. Elizabeth looked at it like it was a court summons. She handed it to Arthur when he walked in the door. He held it between 2 fingers. "Explain." I tried. I said, "I messed up on the last section." "That isn't an explanation," he replied. He placed the paper on the table. "Rewrite the entire chapter, every example, every problem by morning." "That's like 20 pages, I said. He didn't blink. "Then you'd better start." I sat at my desk until the sun came up, hand-cramping, eyes burning. I gave him the stack of papers before school. He flipped through 3 pages, nodded once, and said, "Better." Hazel noticed how out of it I was. Before we left for school, she quietly slipped a granola bar into my hoodie pocket. "You should eat something," she whispered. I didn't say anything back, but I appreciated it. Our parents liked using food as leverage. If I underperformed, dinner magically disappeared. The pressure on Hazel was getting worse, too. She checked her homework like it was radioactive, terrified of making a mistake. I overheard her telling herself, "Don't mess up, don't mess up," while erasing the same math line over and over. But Elizabeth still blamed me for Hazel's stress. "You're distracting her with your failures," she said. "Stay away from her until you fix yourself." Hazel didn't protest. She just kept her eyes down. By 9th grade, something in me just shut off. I didn't decide to stop trying. It just happened. Every worksheet, every quiz, every lecture felt like noise. I went through my days like I was underwater. Teachers asked if I was okay, but they didn't push it. Most of them trusted Elizabeth too much. If I slipped in class, they'd say, "Your mom mentioned you've been rebellious lately," and move on. I wasn't rebellious. I was tired. The day everything at school blew up started in math class. I was supposed to be working on practice problems, but instead I was drawing little cartoons in the margins of my notebook. It was the only thing that made me feel normal for a few seconds. My teacher walked by, took my notebook and sighed. Xavier again. She called home. That was a mistake. 20 minutes later, the classroom door flew open. Elizabeth charged inside, still wearing her school ID badge, hair pulled back aggressively. She didn't even knock. "Where is he?" she snapped. The teacher pointed at me slowly, like she was unsure what was happening. Elizabeth grabbed my backpack, yanked my arm, and dragged me out of the classroom. Students stared. A few whispered. In the hallway, she spun around. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled. Drawing during class, I finished the first. "Shut up," she said. "Do you enjoy embarrassing me?" A teacher nearby poked his head out of his classroom. Elizabeth glared until he went back inside. Then she continued. "You think you get to relax? You think you've earned that I wasn't?" She cut me off again. "I'm sick of your laziness. You're not Hazel. You don't get to slip." She dragged me all the way outside and shoved me toward the car. When Arthur came home that night, he didn't yell. He didn't ask what happened. He just introduced a new rule. No more closed doors. Elizabeth nodded immediately. "Not even the bathroom." Hazel looked horrified. "Mum, seriously. Do you want your brother hiding and wasting time again?" Elizabeth said. "If we allow privacy, he'll abuse it," Arthur added. "This is for his development." I didn't say anything. I knew arguing would make it worse. From then on, the house felt like a stage. If I wanted to change clothes, I had go into a corner and hope nobody walked by. The bathroom rule lasted 3 days before Elizabeth realized she couldn't enforce it without inconveniencing herself, but the bedroom rule stayed. Mine had to remain open at all times. So I found my own tiny ways to push back. During study sessions, I hid in the laundry room for a few minutes until Elizabeth started shouting my name. When she checked my homework, I scribbled nonsense equations in the margins to annoy her. When Arthur barked his morning routine instructions, I ignored half of them and walked slower on purpose. It wasn't much, but it gave me the smallest feeling of control. Elizabeth noticed first. She stared at me more often during dinner, like she was trying to figure out what I was planning. "You're getting sloppy again," she said one night. "You're influencing Hazel." Hazel shook her head. "He's not." Elizabeth cut her off. "Don't defend him. You'll lose focus." Arthur escalated things the next week. Without warning, he took my bedroom door off the hinges and carried it to the garage. "You don't use this responsibly," he said. "You don't get to have it." I looked at Hazel. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." A few days later, Elizabeth cancelled my birthday. "We're not celebrating," she said. Failures don't deserve celebrations. I wasn't surprised. I didn't expect cake or presents. I just wanted a quiet day. Instead, she made me redo old worksheets for hours while Hazel sat in her room trying not to cry loud enough for anyone to hear. That night, Hazel came into my doorway since I didn't have a door anymore and sat on the floor. "You should stop pushing them," she whispered. "They're getting worse." "I'm not pushing anything," I said. "I know," she said. "But they think you are." She gave me another granola bar. She always tried to help in small ways. When she stood up, she said, "Just try not to make them angry. I didn't have the energy to promise anything." Later that night, while I pretended to sleep, I heard Arthur and Elizabeth talking quietly in hallway. "He's slipping further," Arthur said. "If this continues, he's going to ruin everything we built." Elizabeth replied, "We can't let him. Hazel is too important." That was the moment I understood something new. They didn't see me as a child. They saw me as a liability. And once a family starts seeing you that way, the cracks aren't cracks anymore. They're fractures waiting to break wide open. December in our town always hit hard. The kind of cold that sinks through your jacket and settles in your bones. Houses on our street had lights and decorations up, but ours didn't. Elizabeth didn't bother unless she needed holiday photos to send to relatives. A few days before Christmas, the only light in our house came from the kitchen and the study room where Hazel sat, reviewing flashcards for the 100th time. That afternoon, the phone rang. I was upstairs pretending to study when Elizabeth answered. Her voice shifted instantly. "Yes, this is his mother." "I see." An F. I froze. She called Arthur immediately. He came home early. The school counselor had reached out about my declining performance missing assignments and an F on a history test. The counselor recommended a supportive environment at home. Elizabeth took that as an insult. "A supportive environment," she repeated. "We do everything for him. Everything." When she hung up, she stormed into my room. "Get downstairs," she said. "Now." Arthur was already waiting in the dining room, arms folded. Hazel sat at the far end of the table trying to disappear. The school called Arthur said, "You finally hit rock bottom." Elizabeth slammed the phone on the table. "Do you realize what this looks like? Do you understand how humiliating this is?" I tried. "No, you didn't," she snapped. "You embarrass us every time someone looks at your grades." They forced me into a correction session, which basically meant sitting in a chair while they unloaded 6 months of frustration on me. The session lasted 6 straight hours. No breaks, no water, just lectures, worksheets, punishment drills, and yelling. When I finally started crying out of pure exhaustion, Elizabeth snapped. "Oh, don't start that," she said. "Tears won't fix your stupidity." "I'm trying," I said quietly. That was the moment she lost control. "Trying," she repeated, voice shaking. "Trying." "You've done nothing but destroy everything we worked for." She slapped me across the face so hard my vision blurred. Hazel gasped. Elizabeth stepped closer, trembling with rage. "I wish you were never born." Arthur didn't say a word. "You ruined my life," she continued. "If I had known you'd turn out like this, I would have ended the pregnancy." She struck me again and again, not out of discipline this time, out of pure anger. I didn't move. I just stared at the floor and let it happen. Arthur finally stepped in, but not to stop her. He put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Calm down. He's not worth getting this upset over." Then he glared at me. "You hear what you're doing to your mother," he said. "You can't even pass a test. You're dragging this entire family down." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't need dead weight in my house," Arthur said. "If you don't like the rules here, then leave. Take your useless brain with you." Hazel started crying quietly on the stairs. Elizabeth picked up my school bag from the floor and threw it at me. "Get out," she said. "Come back when you can bring value to the family name." The room went silent. I didn't argue. Something inside me just went empty. I picked up the bag, went upstairs and packed a few clothes. A ratty hoodie, some socks. Nothing else felt like mine. Hazel stood in the hallway. "Xavier, don't," she whispered. I shook my head. I don't have a choice. Downstairs, Arthur and Elizabeth didn't even look up. I opened the front door, and the cold hit hard, but it still felt better than staying inside. When I reached the sidewalk, I turned back once. Hazel was at her bedroom window, hands pressed against the glass, crying so hard her shoulders shook. She mouthed the words slowly, clearly. "Don't leave me." For a second, I almost walked back, but then I remembered everything. Every slap, every insult, every punishment, every night I wished I could just disappear. I lowered my head and kept walking. I was 15 years old, alone and freezing, but for the first time in my life the air felt like it actually belonged to me. The first night outside hit me harder than I expected. I walked until my legs hurt and ended up near a gas station on the edge of town. The wind cut straight through my hoodie. I sat behind the dumpster where it blocked some of the wind and pulled my knees to my chest. Cars passed, people laughed from inside warm vehicles, and Christmas lights blinked from the convenience store windows like they were teasing me. I felt invisible. Around midnight, a police cruiser rolled through the lot. I froze, hoping they wouldn't see me. The officer got out and walked toward the dumpster. "You all right, kid?" he asked. I nodded quickly. "Just waiting for a friend." He looked at my thin hoodie, then at the sky. "It's freezing. You got somewhere to go?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just trying to warm up." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. "All right. Don't hang around here too long." When he drove off, I let out a shaky breath. The last thing I wanted was being taken home. I'd rather freeze outside than go back to Arthur and Elizabeth. I stayed behind the gas station until the sun came up, barely sleeping. My hands were stiff, and I couldn't feel my toes. I knew I needed to find food, and somewhere warm. After walking around town for a few hours, I saw a small local restaurant with steam fogging up the front windows. The sign said Carlos Grill in faded red letters. I stood in the doorway for a minute before pushing it open. Inside smelled like coffee and fried eggs. A man in his mid-40s looked up from behind the counter. He had tired eyes, a grey-streaked beard, and a kitchen apron covered in flour. "You lost?" he asked. "No," I said. I'm looking for work. Anything." He looked me over. My bag, my tired face, the way I was shivering. "How old are you, 16? I lied too fast. He raised an eyebrow. "You don't look 16. "I am." He stared for a long second, but didn't argue. "You ever wash dishes?" "Yes." I lied again. He jerked his thumb toward the back. "Sinks that way. Try not to break anything." Just like that, I had a job. The kitchen was hot, loud and cramped. My hands were numb at first, but the warm water helped. I scrubbed pans and plates while trying to stay upright. Carlos walked in after a bit. "You work quiet," he said. "Is that bad?" "No," he replied. "Just rare." Around lunchtime, he pushed a plate toward me. "Eat this before you fall over." It was scrambled eggs and toast. I ate fast, probably too fast, but he didn't comment. He just filled my water glass before going back to the counter. That night, he let me sit in the corner booth for an hour after closing. "Stay inside until I lock up," he said. "Cold's getting worse." He didn't ask where I was staying or why I wasn't in school. He just let me sit. After that first night, I learned fast how to stay invisible. I slept in sheltered corners behind the restaurant, in a laundromat for an hour if nobody noticed, in a stairwell if the door didn't latch. Anything that kept the wind off. I stopped going to school because I couldn't risk being forced back home, and I avoided my old neighborhood like it was radioactive. I kept my head down, worked, and made myself small. It wasn't a plan. It was survival. Over the next few days, he became something like a quiet anchor. Not a friend, not a parental figure, just someone who treated me like a human being instead of a project or a disappointment. He let me eat leftovers, told me when I was washing dishes wrong, and occasionally said things like, "Show up on time tomorrow," which somehow felt like encouragement. One afternoon, while cleaning a stack of heavy pans, my vision went blurry. I tried to steady myself, but everything tilted and I collapsed against the counter. When I came to, I was lying on the floor with Carlos kneeling beside me. "You're burning up," he said. "When's the last time you slept?" "I'm fine," I muttered. "No, you're not," he said. "Sit down. I'll get you water." He brought a small bottle and a plate with bread. "Eat," he said. "You can't work like this." "I need the money." "You'll get it," he replied. "But you're no use," collapsed on the floor. He disappeared into the office and came back with a few bills. "Advance," he said. "Buy warm socks or something." I stared at the money. "I'll pay it back." He shrugged. Didn't ask. He didn't make speeches or talk about responsibility. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't try to understand everything. He saw a kid trying not to fall apart and just helped enough to keep me standing. People sometimes ask why I didn't go to the police. The truth is simple. I didn't want to be sent back. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't want a case or an investigation. I just wanted distance. Elizabeth and Arthur never called, never searched, never asked anyone about me. It was like they assumed I'd return when I learned my lesson. They couldn't risk police or social services asking questions about bruises and what went on in that house. Reporting me would have meant outsiders looking too closely. So they did what they always did, protected their image, and waited for me to crawl back. But I didn't go back. And with each day at the restaurant, each shift that didn't end in punishment, each meal, Carlos slid across the counter without commentary. I realized something. I could survive. Working at Carlos's grill became my foundation, without me realizing it. I stayed there almost 3 years, showing up before sunrise and leaving after closing. I washed dishes until my fingers wrinkled wiped counters, until they shined, and learned to keep pace with a busy kitchen. Carlos never praised me, never lectured me, never played father figure. He just expected me to work, and for once in my life, the expectations felt clear and fair. After saving enough, I moved on to other jobs, warehouse shifts, retail phone sales, delivery routes. I took whatever paid and never complained because I had nothing to fall back on. I ate cheap meals, shared cramped rooms, and learned how to talk to people because my income depended on it. Everything I knew about discipline and persistence came from surviving, not from anything Arthur or Elizabeth claimed to teach me. By 25, I had enough experience to start something of my own. I opened a small sales support company. It wasn't glamorous. My office was inside an old building with flickering lights and a window that didn't fully close. Clients were inconsistent. Some paid late, some never paid at all, but things slowly picked up. By 27, I had steady accounts and a small team. It wasn't wealth, but it was stability, something I never grew up with. I thought my past was behind me. Then, Hazel found me. It happened on a rainy weekday afternoon. I was sorting invoices halfway through a cold coffee when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I ignored those, but something pushed me to answer. A quiet voice said, "Xavier." I froze. My chest tightened. "Who is this?" "It's Hazel." I stood up automatically, like my body reacted before my brain did. "Hazel, where I'm in town," she whispered. "I just need to see you, please." We agreed to meet behind Carlos's grill after he closed. I walked there early, pacing behind the alley like some nervous teenager again. I hadn't seen Hazel since the night I left. In my head, she was still the crying girl at the window, but when she stepped out from the shadows, she looked nothing like the girl I remembered. She was 28 now. Her posture was stiff, her coat buttoned high like armor. She wore glasses, and her eyes looked exhausted, the kind of tiredness you don't sleep off. Her hair was neatly pulled back, but her hands kept fidgeting with the strap of her bag. When she saw me, she stopped walking. "It's really you," she said. "It's really you," I replied. We stood there awkwardly. 12 years of silence doesn't disappear in a minute. "You look good," she said quietly. "You too," I said. Even though she looked like someone carrying a lifetime of weight, she hugged her arms to her chest. "I can't stay long. They think I'm studying with classmates." "You're still living with them?" I asked. She nodded. "They said moving out would ruin my focus. I'm in medical school now." That had been her path since she could walk. "They never let me forget that you left," she continued. "They say you abandoned the family. They say you'll regret it when your life falls apart." I didn't respond. I just let her talk. "I tried to find you," she said, "but they blocked everything. They even checked my phone sometimes. If I asked about you, they got suspicious." I swallowed. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said quickly. I understood why you left. I envied you for it. Hearing that hit harder than anything I'd prepared for. She stepped a little closer. I wanted to warn you. They know about your business. My stomach tightened. How a neighbor mentioned it. Mom said your rebellious phase must be over. Dad said you finally realized their discipline worked. They're planning to reach out, she said. They think bringing you back into the family will make them look good. Of course, I muttered. Hazel looked up at me, eyes watery. I'm scared for you. They're not coming to apologize. They're coming to claim credit. We stayed silent again. Her breath came out in small white clouds. You could leave, I said. You're an adult. She shook her head. I don't have it in me. Not like you. I stayed too long. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I kept this. I don't know why. I wrote it the night you left. She placed it in my hand gently. I should go, she whispered. If they find out I'm gone this late, I nodded. Be careful. She managed a small, sad smile. I'm glad you made it out even if I didn't. Then she turned and walked away, quickly disappearing around the corner. Later that night in my office, I opened the note. I'm sorry. I wish I could go with you. 12 years later, she was still trapped. 12 years later, they still had power over her. 12 years later, they were finally coming for me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to fear. But I also realized something else. I had survived. I had built something, and I wasn't that 15-year-old kid anymore. My business was finally steady when the first message came. I saw the notification late at night while checking my email and the social alerts tied to my business. The name almost didn't register at first. Elizabeth Morgan. We miss you. We hope you're well. Your father and I are proud of how you turned out. I stared at it for a few seconds, then put my phone face down and kept working. No reaction, no emotion. I wasn't 15 anymore. I didn't flinch at her name or her voice in my head. I just didn't care. The next morning, 3 more messages. Let's reconnect. Family is important. It's time to come home. I deleted all of them. 2 days later, the tone changed. You owe us a conversation. After everything we sacrificed, this is how you thank us. Hazel is worried about you. That last one made me pause. Hazel never used guilt, so I knew they were using her name. I texted her a simple message. Did you tell them to contact me? She replied almost instantly. No, they found your business page. I warned you they would. After that, the flood started. Arthur followed every public account I had. Elizabeth commented on old photos like we were close. Handsome son, so proud of you. Call us soon. My employees thought it was some confused older woman. I didn't bother explaining. But then things escalated, because when manipulation doesn't work, controlling people get desperate. A few days later, one of my employees walked into my office looking uncomfortable. Some older guy came in asking for you, he said he was your father. I felt something tighten in my shoulders, not fear, just irritation. What did he want? He tried walking to the back offices. I told him he needed an appointment. He got mad. Of course he did. The next morning, he returned. I was in the lobby reviewing reports when he walked in like he owned the building. Same stiff posture, same cold eyes. But this time, I didn't shrink. Xavier, he said like it was a command. I didn't move. You don't have permission to be here. He tried to smile, but it came out stiff. We need to talk. You've ignored your mother's messages. I'm busy. He stepped closer. This business exists because of us, because of the discipline we gave you. You should show some gratitude. I closed the folder in my hands. You didn't teach me discipline. You taught me survival. He blinked. That wasn't the response he expected. You think you built this on your own? He asked. Yes, I said, because I started from nothing. His jaw tightened. Your mother is stressed because you refuse to acknowledge us. She's sick over this. Not my problem. He scoffed. You're still the same ungrateful. I stood up slowly. He stopped talking. I wasn't the small kid he used to tower over. I had a few inches and a solid amount of muscle on him now. For the first time, he looked unsure of himself. You don't get to walk into my business, I said calmly. You don't get to claim my success. and you don't get to talk to me like I'm a child." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You're done here. Leave." He tried glaring, but it didn't land the way he wanted. After a few seconds, he turned and walked out without saying another word. That night, Elizabeth called me. Not a message this time, an actual call. I answered because I wanted to hear what angle she'd use. Her voice came out shaking. "How dare you speak to your father like that? Like what? You humiliated him." "Good." She went silent for a moment, then tried the emotional route. "We just want our family back. We want to celebrate how successful you are now." Her voice cracked into a half sob. "You were such a difficult child, but look what you became. Doesn't that mean our methods worked?" "No," I said. "It means I escaped." Her breathing got louder. She switched tactics. "You abandoned us. Do you understand what that did to Hazel? Do you understand the pain you put this family through? I understand exactly what you put me through. You ungrateful." I hung up. 5 minutes later, Hazel texted me. "Don't talk to them. They're spiraling. They think they can force you to come back." Force me," I replied. "They're planning something. A big family reconciliation dinner. They already told relatives you're coming home. They want to take pictures with you. It was never about reconnecting. It was about publicity." Hazel sent another message. "Please don't go. They'll twist everything." I answered, "I'm not going anywhere near that house." Over the next few days, Arthur and Elizabeth escalated again. Emails, voice notes, accusations, fake apologies, even a formal letter asking me to restore the Morgan legacy by partnering my business with the family name. Then came the last straw. They showed up outside my office building again, waiting near the entrance like they could corner me. That's when I decided to end it. On my terms. I sent them a message. "If you want to talk, meet me tomorrow. Neutral place, no surprises." I chose a public cafe near downtown. Neutral territory. No chance of them trying anything dramatic. They arrived together sitting upright like they were attending a job interview. Elizabeth wore the same polite smile she used on her students. Arthur looked like he thought this was some negotiation. I didn't sit down right away. I stood at the edge of the table. "This is the last time we're doing this," I said. Elizabeth reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "We just want our son." "You don't have one," I said. "Not anymore." Arthur's jaw clenched. "Watch your tone." "No," I said. "You don't get to tell me that." They waited for me to soften. I didn't. "You want the truth," I said. "You don't miss me. You miss the idea of me. You miss how I made you look. You miss the story you could tell other people." Elizabeth whispered. "We did our best. Your best almost killed me." Arthur leaned forward. "You owe this family something." "I owe you nothing," I said. "Not a conversation, not a holiday, not a legacy. Nothing." Elizabeth's face twisted. "You're cruel." "No," I said. "I'm free." And I stood up and walked away without waiting for a reply. That night, Hazel messaged me again. "Did it go okay?" I said what I needed to say. I replied. After a minute, she wrote back. "I'm proud of you, really." I texted her. "When you're ready to leave, I'll help you. Anytime." I locked my office that night, feeling something I'd never felt growing up: peace. 2 winters passed after that final meeting. I never heard from Arthur or Elizabeth again. No messages, no calls, nothing. They'd finally learned I wasn't a kid they could corner. Hazel and I stayed in touch quietly. She was still finishing her medical program and trying to survive the house we grew up in. I never pushed her. Just reminded her she wasn't alone. Near the end of her last year, she called me, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard. "I'm moving out," she said. "I'm done letting them run my life." When she asked for help packing, I said yes. That weekend, we loaded her things into a small van. She kept looking at the house like it had finally shrunk to its real size. When we finished, she hugged me. "You got out and kept going," she whispered. That made it easier for me to believe I could too. Carlos showed up as we unloaded her things, handed her warm food, and said, "Starting fresh is easier on a full stomach." It was simple, but it grounded both of us. After that, life felt steadier, not perfect, just real. My business grew. Hazel built a routine, and sometimes the 3 of us had dinner together. Arthur and Elizabeth told relatives we were independent, now rewriting the story again, but it didn't matter. Their version of reality no longer touched mine. Every Christmas since I left at 15, I avoided decorations, but last year Hazel brought me a small silver star. "It doesn't have to mean anything bad anymore," she said. I put it on the shelf beside my first business invoice and the spare key to Carlos's restaurant. Seeing those three things together felt strange at first, then it felt right. Hazel left with a promise to visit again. Later, Carlos texted asking if I needed help shoveling. I said no, and he showed up anyway. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something to escape. It felt like something I could walk into with both hands open.